Hey guys, welcome to this video on Ethereum. I have been thinking about making this for a while, and I think that Ethereum is just one of the most beautiful currencies to read with astrology. And now this is not the exact time for the first trade or the first anything like that. This is the formation of the planets in our solar system at the time that Ethereum began, on the day it began. Essentially, this is really, you don't have to worry too much about the angles because this is not a chart for a specific time and place. This is just the chart of the day, essentially. So it's really interesting that Ethereum came into being and was launched with such strong Leo energy. It's kind of the exact opposite of Bitcoin, actually, where Bitcoin has, and I'll go over Bitcoin's chart as well, but Bitcoin has this sort of wintry, Capricornian, sort of behind the scenes element. And Bitcoin also doesn't have a founder that we know of, right? Satoshi Nakamoto is true. His or their identity is still unknown. So Bitcoin has, and that's very reflective in the Bitcoin chart. But Ethereum is different. We know the people that developed Ethereum: Vitalik Buterin, Gavin Wood, and Charles Hoskinson, among a few other developers as well. But it's very well known. The creation story of Ethereum is very well known. The platform itself has a very kind of overt and sort of in-your-face kind of energy. It's very publicized. Ethereum was sort of always meant to be successful based on this chart. I feel like Ethereum just has a very strong sense of its presence in the world, and there's a lot of interesting themes here. So first of all, the sun in Leo, so it's flashy, it's dramatic, it's very openly seen, right? And it also has a Mercury in Leo and a Jupiter in Leo, with Venus at 0 degrees of Virgo, which is also fascinating given that it's exactly opposed to Bitcoin's Venus, which is at 0 degrees of Pisces. So you kind of get this diametrically opposed energy between Ethereum and Bitcoin, which is so beautiful considering that they are the two most talked about and most foundational cryptocurrency in the public eye, at least for this period of like the first decades of cryptocurrency kind of coming into the market sphere, the first years of cryptocurrency in the public discourse. So one of the things that really stands out to me with the Ethereum chart is that you have this Saturn-Jupiter square happening, so between Leo and Scorpio, and they're in the later degrees, and Saturn's actually retrograde in Scorpio, so the aspect is applying. So Jupiter is moving towards the aspect and Saturn is moving towards the aspect. You also have Mars opposing the moon as well on this day. And they're in mutual reception, essentially. The moon is in Mars's exaltation sign of Capricorn, and Mars is in Cancer, which is, of course, ruled by the moon. So you have this tense opposition across the chart, but they're actually in a harmonious connection with each other by dignity. So you have this, tension and contentiousness with Mars opposite moon. Anytime you have Mars opposite moon, it's a challenge. It implies a certain contentiousness. It implies infighting and competitiveness and potential like backstabbing type of energy when you're looking at the chart for an organization or for an entity, a group of people. It's kind of a challenging energy to be born under, right? If you're an individual and you have that, you can have relationships in your life where you feel maybe bullied at times, or you are bullied at times, or you have to constantly work out the creative tension between your needs and the needs of others. And sometimes the way of working that out is not pleasant. Sometimes it's sort of rocky, and you can feel very sensitive in certain ways, very sensitive to certain types of attack, for example. Whether it's verbal or like mental or physical, it's just you feel more sensitive to negative energy. So there's a sense here with the moon opposite Mars that there is this kind of infighting, or there is this contentiousness, but at the same time, it really is a creative tension that's giving birth to things that are good because of this Mars being in the moon's dignity and then the moon being in Mars's dignity. It's like we're in this opposition and we're two, forces that don't normally get along that well, the moon and Mars, but they end up kind of contributing overall to each other, like they need each other, right? So with these themes playing out, it feels to me like, well, one thing is clear, that Ethereum has been one of the most talked about cryptocurrencies out there, but there also has been a great deal of contentiousness within the community. For example, there's been struggles between the miners and the creators, or different philosophical directions. There's also been theft, which led to the forking of Ethereum, and we can talk about those charts in a different video, but I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. But essentially you do get this sense with Ethereum that yes, they come out strong. They're the sun in Leo. It's a very visible cryptocurrency. It's very successful, Jupiter in Leo as well. It's very prominent, it's successful, it's a really powerful platform, it's versatile. And at the same time, when you have the sun in Leo, like individuals or entities with the sun in Leo tend to play out themes and experiences of the nature of Apollo, which is the Greek sun god. And I like to look at, even when I'm doing mundane astrology, I like to look at the stories behind certain energies, because a lot of truth is conveyed in myth, and there are myths that have survived, 4,000-5,000 years for good reason. I'm talking about across the entire planet, not just Greek mythology, but in general, the stories that get retold are often astrologically based, but they also have correspondences in how things are playing out in the human world. So one of the things that comes to mind here with the sun in Leo is, the theme of Apollo, stories of Apollo, and then the square, which is a hard aspect between Jupiter in Leo. So it's a big part of that Leo energy, is in square with Saturn in Scorpio. And what comes to mind with that is the story of Apollo and the Python. So in order to seize Delphi, the story goes that Apollo had to slay the Python, which was kind of terrorizing and ruling over that city. And when he succeeded in killing the Python was transformed basically and became the source for the oracle at Delphi. So the priestess at Delphi, who was also called the Pythoness, she was uttering essentially divine revelations, and we still have a lot of the wisdom recorded from that time and a lot of mysteries related to the oracle at Delphi. But the origin of the oracle at Delphi was the Python that was killed by Apollo. So we have this theme of like death and resurrection with Scorpio. And with the theme of the Python, Scorpio is also associated with one element of Scorpio is the snake. So there is this kind of really beautiful description of this myth in this configuration where you have Jupiter coming into a hard aspect and then Saturn, moving backwards directly into that hard aspect. And it's almost this, again, mirroring the kind of contentiousness that we see with the Moon-Mars opposition as well. It's almost like through these experiences of great challenge, there is this kind of death and rebirth that happens with Ethereum. So because Ethereum was, started underneath this sort of planetary photo, underneath this planetary storyline, right? We can get some insight into the meaning of the trials and tribulations that Ethereum goes through and what we can expect the results to be, which, generally are positive. And the other thing about this, which is so fascinating, is that the challenges and the problems that Ethereum tackles leads to sort of oracular revelations, right? Because even Ethereum itself is the platform that created smart contracts. And in order for smart contracts to be executed. Basically, if you're not familiar, a smart contract is essentially a bonding way for two people or two businesses or whatever to come to an agreement and then have that agreement be fulfilled automatically on the blockchain once the conditions of the contract are met. So essentially, it's just a way for people to enter into agreements and enter into and conduct business. There's so many uses. And this is just such a huge accomplishment. What this did was it opened up the door for people to have trustless interactions with each other, where we're eliminating the element of mistrust, we're eliminating the element of challenge related to not knowing if we can rely on the other person to fulfill their end of the contract. It's really hard to explain how smart contracts are going to change the world, but they will change almost everything about how business is conducted, how our economy runs, and even things in government or in sectors that you wouldn't think necessarily would be related to this kind of thing will all be transformed. But in order for people to use smart contracts, they needed something to bridge the gap between the blockchain world and the quote unquote real world where data is fed into. So for example, one way of using a smart contract would be if you enter into a contract with someone and there's a financial transaction that needs to occur in order for the rest of the contract to be met, then when those financial conditions are met, then the contract will be fulfilled and whatever the rest of the contract is will be released. And so you need some way to bring the data of, the details of the transaction into blockchain, or you need some way to verify, right, real world data on the blockchain. And so the name for the, solution for that is oracles. So without getting into too much technical details, I just think it's so magical that sort of what we're seeing with cryptocurrency in general, and what we can get from this sort of analysis where we're merging, story with reality, and story with technological innovation, is we're seeing that innovation is supplying the evolution of our technology so that we can meet those needs. And in the process, we are solving problems and experiencing, challenges related to that. But what comes from that is, something as ingenious as oracles, right? Like oracles in cryptocurrency bridge the gap between the blockchain and the real world. And it's no coincidence that we get the concept of oracles coming through a currency with this type of a planetary signature, because we literally have, in mythic terms, we have these energies of the clash between Leo and Scorpio, the clash between Apollo and the Python. We have the clash between the need to set up a new and more just world, right? Because that's so often with what Apollo is doing in myth, is trying to set up a more just world, and it's not always perfect, right? But there's, elements of Apollo in, for example, the Arestia, where it's kind of like the movement into the justice system and trying to aspire to justice. We have both Apollo and Athena associated with that in the trial of Orestes after he executed his mother. But we don't have to go into all that. That's a big story that we don't have to go into right now. But there are some elements of that I see, present in this chart as well. But basically the thing is, the sun and the sign of Leo is associated with that kind of hero's journey and the struggle to sort of bring about a way of life that is more just, that is more prosperous, that is better. And sometimes that can, slide over into the ego, but occasionally it can work in the favor of a society if there is a solar kind of leader, because that leader is really wanting things to be well so that they can be remembered as an amazing leader. So sometimes that, if it's kept somewhat in check, sometimes that egotistical element of Leo or of the sun, can be a positive force. It can be a force for good, because there is this element of striving for something that is good, wanting to measure oneself against some sort of an abstract concept of a higher, the highest benefit, right? Reaching for the highest expression of self is generally something that results in positive things. So basically, with this Jupiter-Saturn square, mutually applying square, it does speak to me of, the creation of the oracle at Delphi, or the creation of oracles. Literally, they're called oracles in cryptocurrency. It's a radical revelation that sort of bridges two worlds, right? And I just think it's so succinct and so beautiful and so thematically just perfect that I just couldn't even believe it. But the Moon and Mars opposition as well, it kind of links back to that, because we do have this sense of that there will be hurdles to overcome, and there will be disagreements, and there will be those times when certain groups of people are sort of at war with other groups of people in relation to Ethereum, or there will be competition. We know very well that the creators of Ethereum are not all working together anymore. They're actually working on their own projects, and I'm not going to go into all of those details either, but essentially with Ethereum, you do have this sense that whatever troubles they go through are ultimately part of the journey of creating something that is, solar in nature, that is expansive. So I think there's a lot to look out for with Ethereum. I think that there's a lot more room to grow. And just really quickly, we can go over the price of Ethereum. So right now, Ethereum is mooning, as they say, although we have had a little correction today. This kind of adds to another layer of meaning to what people say when they say that a cryptocurrency is mooning. These lines in this chart are the longitude of the planets graphed into Ethereum's price. So essentially, each of these lines represents the position of one of the planets. And this diagonal line that you can see, and there's another one here, these are the moon lines, right? And so ignore all the other stuff that I have going on here. It's zoomed out, so there's a lot of data, but essentially what you can see is that when, it's funny because people will say when a cryptocurrency is going up a lot, they'll say, oh, it's mooning, Ethereum's mooning right now. And I always laugh when I hear that, because it's just so funny that it actually goes upward in alignment with the moon line. The moon, this is the moon's line graphed onto planetary price, and it is literally mooning, following the moon line. So as long as it's following the moon line, then it's going to continue to go up. And then when it breaks from that, then you might see some sideways action for a while, or maybe a correction. But I just think that is so beautiful. Let me know your guys' thoughts down below. I absolutely love Ethereum. I think it's an amazing and very transformative technology and platform, and I'm a holder. So full disclosure, I will be making another video before too long, just kind of answering some questions and some housekeeping things about why I decided to change up the content of my channel, and just where my head is at philosophically with what's going on right now with finances and the world, and mundane astrology as well. So feel free to leave any questions that you may have for me down below, and I will do my best to answer all of the ones that I think are appropriate. And I will also put the link for my financial lifetime kind of financial overview reading. So if you would like to book a reading with me, that information will be below as well, and I will talk to you in the next one.